Hello, I am Brian Germain, and this is Casual Chat. We've got a really cool guest today here. I've been wanting to do this show for years. We have Brian Walker, aka Rocketguy.
My next guest is an inventor who plans to launch himself into space in a homemade rocket. Here you can see a model of the rocket, which he has built in his backyard. We're not kidding about this. He isn't either. Please welcome Brian Rocketguy Walker.
Brian, welcome. I am psyched you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be on your show, and it's been it's like 30 days from being 1 year when we went jumping together at Capalzen, because that was May 30th, my birthday, and that was so fun.
It was so nice to see your face in free fall again.
Yeah, I miss that.
Yep, absolutely. So, well, let's sort of get a general sense. So you're many things, and I would say if there was one central theme, you're a brainstormer inventor with a vast array of skill sets and fascinations, and it led you to so many places.
Right. I like to think of myself more, though, as a cerebral creator, because not everything I do is invent.
Yes.
Create things. Sometimes it's an invention. Now, like my submarine, technically wasn't really an invention, but a whole lot of the little things I've done fall right into that category.
Yeah, certainly we can get into a lot more of the details of the amazing things that you've created. I'm constantly blown away by where your brain goes, because you don't seem to have any real limitations.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a reason, I believe. Along with being really creative and really imaginative and having a colorful and vivid mind, when I was tested in 1976, when I went to OIT, they gave us a customary IQ test. And then they asked me to come back and do it again. Okay. After I did it a second time, then a couple of days later, they called me in, and all these guys were like, we don't understand how you could have such an incredibly high IQ, but all through your primary education, you were a C- student. And they could not correlate the two. And back then, they didn't know about bipolar. They didn't know about ADHD. So they had no guide to go by. And I believe that the reason that intellect never came out in a more traditional way is because the right hemisphere, so that's left hemisphere. Right hemisphere is where all the creativity and all this is. And that part of my brain has always been lit up so much, I could never integrate how intelligent I was.
Yeah, well, our school systems are not really geared towards tapping people's potential. It's getting people to fit in with the model and, walk to the beat of their drummer instead of your way of doing it.
If I have my way, after the 6th grade, when people have begun to show their proclivities and what they're good at and what they're not good at, that I'd have a whole different system of high school where it wouldn't be like one high school for a district. You'd have a high school for people that were math prodigies. You'd have a high school for people that showed incredible musical talents. You'd have a high school that showed people with the engineering mindset and all that stuff. Because throwing everyone in and saying, because like me, I was ADHD and dyslexic, along with being bipolar, but no one knew it at the time. I was always considered dumb. I was probably that close to having to ride the short bus, which may have been good for me. I don't know. But, our education system leaves a lot to be gained.
Yep.
Because it's government.
Well, but it's also people, thankfully, people that can make decisions based on a compassionate viewpoint. I think it's still possible for us to upgrade our school systems to honor the talents, the gifts that individual kids had. I mean, let's face it, every kid can pick up a basketball pretty much and throw it at a hoop, but not everybody's going to be Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And I that we can figure out relatively early on what a kid has, a knack for. And in your case, you've got an engineering mind that is just, just mind-boggling. Who could you have been if that was supported, right? So I think that's and but you self-supported on your own, didn't you? You found ways to create a rocket ranch where you had a mad scientist laboratory. I want to talk about this rocket ranch that you made.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
wanted to be an astronaut because, like, all right, the first launch into space was 1960. That's all I wanted to be, an astronaut. I would write letters to NASA, and they'd send me manila envelopes full of pictures that covered my wall. But by the time I was 9 years old, I'm like, you know what? I'm not smart enough. I'm never going to go to college. And I'm never going to be a naval test pilot. Because in those days, Eisenhower would only allow naval test pilots to fly. So I realized, I'm never going to be an astronaut. So I said at that time, well, someday I'll grow up and I'll build my own rocket. And then, 40 years later, I was building it. And I got pretty close, but I had to back away.
But the thing is that the concept is laid, right? So, that the movie, the astronaut farmer, and that kind of, which of course is based on you. Of course it is. That dream is not just individual. It's not just your dream. It's my dream too. It's the dream of millions of people.
Right.
And that's why it resonates. It rings a little bell inside of all of us that wants to be Buck Rogers.
Right. Well, that the astronaut farmer, I got to tell you, that really pissed me off because in 2006, I'm in a theater and they show the upcoming scenes for the astronaut farmer. And all through the audience, I could hear a little hush sound saying, "Is that Rocketguy? Is that about Rocketguy?" And the movie was not a good movie. It was poor. I mean,
terrible.
Do you know how long it takes one man to build a Atlas booster and an actual Mercury capsule? It takes you forever. And then after the accident, when his wife gave him a bag of $260,000, he was out. He had the second one built in like a month. There's a scene in the movie where he's walking along in a spacesuit, and I have a scene of me walking along in my spacesuit.
Yeah.
And then there was a scene when they were at a county fair, and there was a little children's ride that you sit in and goes around, and that was he rented that, and it was his like centrifuge.
Right.
And I had a real centrifuge. And then at the very end of the movie, when they show credits, they're doing a mock Jay Leno interview. And if you watch that interview, and then you watch my Conan O'Brien interview, it's just as obvious as heck that movie was about me. And if you know when it came out, my publicity was from 2000 to 2004. The movie came out in 2006. So do the math. Now, they'd come to me and said, "We'd like to do a movie about this." It would have been 100 times better.
Well, who knows? It's not too late for that as well. I remember a movie called Salvage One.
Oh, yeah, that was a TV series.
It was a TV series, correct? Yes. And that was inspiring. Exactly. And that inspired me as well. And I started building rockets. My mom's engineering friend came over and said, "Brian, I'm an engineer. I wouldn't even begin to design a combustion chamber." Right. And so he put me off of it. And I think a lot of times our dreams get held back by naysayers.
Oh, yeah.
And our, sort of, going with the flow of what people say, but you didn't do that.
I've been dealing with naysayers my whole life. And there's been very, very few yay-sayers.
Yes,
exactly. Even my family and friends, they were always shaking their head. "Brian, get a job, quit inventing, get a job." And then all of a sudden I'm making millions of dollars. And do you think any of them came to me and patted me on the back and said, "Way to go, you beat the odds, you didn't listen to us, you're a millionaire now"? No. Everyone was just, all they wanted was money.
Right. Well, I understand that. Nobody wants to feel like they are wrong, but we only need one supporter. You know what I mean? When you have a dream, and I think you've done an exceptional job of allowing yourself to move forward with visions like, the toys that you've invented have changed the world, right? But you can't go to Disney World without seeing a light chaser.
The whole, my light chaser was never even patented, and they sold $1 billion. Oh, and anyway, for anyone that's wondering,
yes, you happen to have one right there on the shelf.
This is the Mickey Mouse light chaser.
Yeah.
And then Buzz Lightyear.
Oh,
and one of my favorites, because this is really special, The Incredibles. So you can see there's a guy on top, and there's a little boy inside. When I turn it on, the little boy runs around the opposite direction of this.
Very clever. So you had to gear that to invert that. Wow, very clever.
They made over 120 different versions with every Disney character. So the battery is gone on R2-D2.
Well, that's okay. We get the idea, but you got to love R2.
And one of my favorites, Scooby-Doo.
Oh,
you know what? I think I have 10 left, and I'm thinking...
Should auction them off.
Yeah, I'm thinking on my podcast of auctioning autographed light chasers, and then the money goes to St. Jude's.
Very nice.
So I would want to get a fair amount for these, because if I'm going to lose my collection, which I love, then I've got to have people bidding to make it worthwhile.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, if I sold all 10 of them for $10, that's $100. Well,
That's not going to save anybody's life. Yeah.
No.
I love it. I love it though. That you went from, let's back up in time, right? So before you were inventing toys to fund your, fascination with rockets and jet planes and submarines and all this stuff, what were you doing? Were you working at Walmart or something?
No, I was working at Kmart. No, I was from 77 to like 82. I was a draftsman. Then I joined a missionary organization. I don't know if you know this, and I went to Guatemala with a missionary group called YWAM. 3,600 miles each way in a bus. You don't want to do that.
Wow.
A visit to hell would be better.
Wow.
And then after that is when I started getting more. I invented my
I love this.
powered ventilated hard hat
for the hot days.
Solar cells.
That's such a great idea.
This is the first invention that I actually made a prototype of, and it actually worked quite well. And now you can buy one similar to this on the market, but and then I developed my stretcher for the military. I spent 8 years on that, built 9 different versions.
Folding stretcher?
Yeah, it would fold up into a pack, and it would
Brilliant.
And then after that, I built my hovercraft, the 9-foot diameter hovercraft.
Which is amazing.
And I wanted to put these in an arena, and they have laser guns and sensors, so you put a dozen of them in an arena, it'd be like floating bumper cars and these video games and these laser tags. But after that, 86, I met Richard Evanson, who owned an island in Fiji called Turtle Island, a resort, one of the top 10 in the world at the time. It was $1,500 a day per couple back then. Today it's $3,500 a day per couple. But it was there where I built my submarine. And I loved the sub. It worked well enough to prove the concept was absolutely worthy. But being that it was a prototype and I built it on a 500-acre island in the middle of nowhere without a shop, it couldn't be left and put into service. I would have, if I was going to stay with it, I'd have changed the design considerably, make it a whole lot better. But while I was there, I was there 3 weeks and had my appendix out. Then I drowned, and then I got electrocuted by the island center.
Oh, you drowned in the submarine, or was this?
No. I used to do rock diving. I go out to where the water is 100 feet deep, and then with a big rock, I'd roll over, and when I hit the bottom, I let go of the rock, and I come up. Well, one day I went too far, and it wasn't like 100 feet. It was more like 160. And I should have dropped the rock long before I hit bottom. because it was a
Yeah.
smaller rock too.
Yeah.
And by
Yeah.
the time I came up, I was straining because my lungs were screaming. And I took it just before I hit surface. I went, and then took in the water.
Yeah.
However, the boat from the neighboring, the boat that had taken guests to the neighboring island. See, on Sunday mornings, the neighboring island had a Methodist mission, so the guests would go over on Sunday morning to hear them sing because their song is beautiful, beautiful. So they were coming back, and they came over to see why there was a paddleboard floating there with no one in it. And just as they pulled up to it, I came up under the boat, which I'm glad because that people heard and they saw my legs. And since I didn't have any air in my lungs, I would have started sinking really quick. But they hauled me in and got me to shore and restarted me. It was about a minute 30. So,
All right.
So good cautionary tale. Don't do that. All right. That's absolutely amazing. And I don't think people should try that.
No, but I'll tell you what, it was an amazing time. The day I arrived, and everyone comes and goes by seaplane, the day I arrived, Barbara Bach and Ringo Starr were leaving. And I'm like, oh, if I got here a day earlier, I could have hung out with Ringo at night around the Copper Bowl.
Wow. Wow.
But I met
amazing.
the two nicest people I met, in fact, almost the nicest people, period, Senator John and Cindy McCain.
No
They
kidding.
came to the island 4 days after he won his first Senate election. And I didn't know who he was, and we're sitting around the Copper Bowl one night, and I said, well, John, tell me about yourself. And he goes, well, 25 years ago, I was shot down in my F-4 over Hanoi, and I ended up in a prisoner of war camp for 5 years. So I'm like,
Yeah.
and just to show how humble he is, he didn't tell me the true story. The true story is, after 1 year, his captors wanted to let him go because they thought it would curry favor with the West because McCain's father and grandfather were high-ranking admirals. Now, this is what, to me, what made John McCain a real hero. He said, no, I won't go ahead of my men. I will go when my time is due. He was there 4 more years.
Wow.
Now, could you imagine that level
That's
of
heroic.
commitment?
That's heroic.
That's
Wow.
heroic. You know what? There's no such thing as a hometown hero when you're talking about a guy that gets a 4.2 GPA and he's lettering in sports and he's going to Harvard, and they call that the hometown hero. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's just like sports hero.
Yeah.
A hero is someone who puts their life on the line for another person.
There you go.
That's it. If you're not risking your life, I don't think you can really be a hero.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. I think that's true. And you risked your life an awful lot doing this, series of projects, spinning yourself silly on your own self-built centrifuge. Let's talk about this, right? So you could practice, escalating your G's and seeing how you could handle it.
Well, I'm pretty confident of this. I have probably spent more time in the centrifuge than any human in history. Because I had it in my backyard, and I used to go out and ride it every day, 4 or 5 minutes at a time. I probably had 2 hours in it. And I think an astronaut or a pilot, jet pilot or something, they may get 15, 20 minutes in a centrifuge because it doesn't take long. But I like the feeling. However, here's another one of my blunders. They say that 10 Gs for a minute is fatal. I once rode it to 10 Gs for 50 seconds and passed out, and then my hand relaxed on the throttle. And when I was coming to, I had to be rushed to the hospital. I was having a heart attack, and they had to put a stent in my artery.
Oh, geez, because it collapsed something. Oh,
Well,
man.
it was just, okay, at the time I weighed around 200 pounds, meaning at 10 Gs I weighed 2,000 pounds. And once you get above 6 Gs, you can't even lift your arms. They're glued. So
I know. I've been there.
Yeah.
in a fighter. 5 and 6 Gs is very intense. Super
But in a
intense.
fighter, it's short term because it's during a turn. But in a centrifuge, it's like however long you're in it.
Yeah. Well,
We did several minutes of high bank turns because the GPS had lost us. because we were doing too many crazy things. We were literally lost in this MiG-21, and we maintained it for a while. What I discovered, and maybe you feel this too, is that after just a few seconds, the peripheral vision was black. And then it started to narrow, but I could still see in the middle. And then I'd play around with roll angle. I'd reduce roll angle, reduce G's, and then it would get wider. And I'd roll over more, pull back on the stick a little bit, increase G's, and blind, absolutely blind. So did you find that was the case as well then?
Yeah, in a centrifuge, yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
But now you said a MiG-21?
21, and you got to fly
supersonic.
well, I didn't go supersonic, but I went very close to it because we were over the continental US where that's not legal, whereas you went to Russia and flew a MiG-25
Yeah.
to the edge of space.
That was the most awesome thing I've done to date.
Yeah.
It was, but here's funny, when he was about ready to close me in to my car, because see, the MiG-25 is a single seat, but they built an extended nose version for training.
Yes.
And when the pilot was securing me into my cockpit, he had told me, like, keep your eye on the Mach gauge and altitude and stuff. And he said, when it hits Mach 1, you won't even know because it sounds behind you.
Yes.
But you'll see the needle go boop, boop, boop for a second. But I have a friend in Tampa. He has a MiG-21. He also has an L-39 Albatross.
Oh, I pack those parachutes regularly. Yeah, I've got a number of friends that have those. It's an amazing airplane.
Oh, yeah. He lets me fly it sometimes. He also has a Rockwell twin-engine pressurized plane. He took out all the seats and back, so now he can take people up to do zero-G flights.
Fantastic.
Only for 8 seconds, because, when you're doing a zero-G flight, you're screaming down going 32 feet per second. And like the big planes, they can give you 30 seconds, but by the end of 30 seconds, they're going so freaking fast that they need to pull up then. Now, on my friend's plane, it's not nearly as stout as the Ilyushin 76, but he had to pull up after 8 seconds or he'd rip his wings off. Right.
You're going to over G it at that speed. That's, of course, the Vomit, Comet, and other planes. We do it in jump planes. I mean, you have to be very careful because I have had, doing zero-G, pushovers in jump planes. You can end up with everybody in the tail. That's what happened to us once. It was literally like a scrum. There was a pile of jumpers in the back of the airplane where the CG now is a little harder to, it's out of balance and it's hard to get the nose back down. It was scary. So, it's not a safe thing to do unless you really know what you're doing and you've got those helper people, right? Didn't you did a zero-G flight at Star City as well?
Yeah, I did the Ilyushin 76. We did 7 circuits. And the funny thing is, like, when you go zero-G, your equilibrium begins to get out of place, right? And the moment the gravity turns back on, then boom, your equilibriums are locked.
Yep.
And each time you do it, it gets a little bit more off. So after our second term, we were all feeling ill.
Yes.
After the third time, we were feeling really ill. I managed to the 7th time before I hurled. So
that's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's
did you ever see Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks?
Of course.
Okay. Remember the scene when they were in space and Bill Paxton threw up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's because he wasn't acclimated to zero-G. That was real vomit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he said, Frank Borman was barfing halfway to the moon. Yeah, it's a normal thing, and we can acclimatize to it, like you did with the centrifuge. I think if people do it on a more regular basis, like I used to do zero-G every single jump load after you drop the static line. Students on the way back down, we do zero-Gs, and in a 206, a Cessna 206, you can cannonball and spin yourself for a while. It's a lot of fun. It's my favorite feeling, I'd have to say.
There's a company here called Zero-G, and they operate as like a 727 or something that's designed for I knew the guy that started that. It was a guy named Peter Diamandis. He was the guy behind the X Prize.
Yep.
For the first private space flight.
Sure.
And anyway, when he started this out, they had actually built a module to fit inside of a cargo plane that had, nothing in it.
Yep.
And that, like a UPS plane. And then when they were done with their people, they removed that module and put the plane back in service. But now, I believe, from what I've seen, there's an actual dedicated plane to that.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Which makes sense because they can make a lot of money.
Yep. Well, who hasn't wanted to feel weightless, right? I think this is a universal thing. Flight and going to space, that overlook perspective. And let's talk about that a little bit more because, you've been up very high. I've been very high in a fighter plane and jumping out of them a few times. It is a unique perspective that I wish everybody could experience.
Yeah.
Were you looking, did you come down from, what was it, like 100,000 feet or something that you went to?
Oh,
did you
no,
come down, change?
No, we were
80?
up around 60, 70.
60 or 70, yeah. So
somewhere in that range, but not 100, no.
Yeah, well,
that plane was never meant to go there. A commercial airline, they're not meant to go over 35, 36,000 feet. You get up around 40, 42,000 feet, then you're going to have potential structural issues with it.
Well, and it's very, very cold, once you get up that. I mean, it's already pretty cold, but now we're talking about 100 below or more.
Well, when I was up there at the top at 85,000 feet, the pilot goes, "Brian, put your hands on the canopy." And it was 60 degrees below outside.
Yeah.
So, it's warm.
Yeah.
But here's the best part. On the way down, 60,000 feet, Mach 1.5, the pilot comes on my headset and says, "Brian, do you want to fly the airplane?" And I said, "Hey, does Howdy Doody got wooden balls? Yeah, I want to fly the airplane." So he gave me control. And I did one big, huge turn that ate up 100 miles on the ground, okay? Then, this is the best part, I did 2 barrel rolls left and 2 barrel rolls right. And that was cool to be traveling 1.5 Mach at 60,000 feet in a plane that was designed to kill me during the Cold War.
Yep.
The Russians built 1,156 MiG-25s during the Cold War, and the one I flew in, number 02, that was the last operational MiG in the world.
Wow.
I mean, MiG-25.
MiG-25. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Now, let's talk about sort of the experience of this, right? So actually doing it, it's heavenly. It's an amazing, so you feel so powerful, but how did it change you? Having been up that high, looking down at the earth, feeling like you did something you came here to do, to go up, up there.
I don't know if I would say it changed me. It enlightened me. It did give me some new perspective to just see the earth that high. I mean, when we were looking, you could see the curve, and you look down, and the clouds were so far below us, it looked like white broccoli sprouting on the planet. So, it was amazing. But I'll tell you one thing, that plane was old.
Yeah.
It was on the canopy, where the canopy seals, there was some Bondo. It looked like it was done by Stevie Wonder. And it was scary because the plane's old. But yeah, it was awesome. And now they retired that plane about 15 years ago. So now you don't even have the option to go up in the MiG-25. If you want to go up and see space, you've either got to go on Blue Origin, Spaceship 2, or Elon Musk. Other than that, there's no other way. And you know what? In all of human history, there have probably been less than 5,000 people, 85,000 feet or higher, either astronauts, MiG-25, and SR-71 pilots. So
you too.
I'm in a very exclusive fraternity.
It's a small club. It's a small club for sure. Yeah. And hopefully we'll see more, sort of breakthroughs in technologies that will lower the prices, and more and more people will get to experience this overlook effect. That, I mean, for me, it was very emotional for me. I mean, tears. I was in tears, and just no borders, right? There's countries. It's all just one living
One big map.
ecosystem. One ecosystem. That was the aliveness of the planet, like one massive organism. That's, for me, that was the emotional realization that we're all just part of this massive living system.
Did you hear William Shatner's responses and see him
Yes.
after his flight?
Absolutely. Yes.
And he didn't even bother with zero G. He was glued to the window looking out.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came down, he was in tears, and he said, this was so profound because you look down, it's life. It's life everywhere. You look up, it's death. And it's like all those years of playing Captain Kirk, it wasn't real. But now he was up here, looking down, looking up, and it was just like, I almost had a feeling he was saying, why are we going into space?
Right, which is, I get that.
And that brings me on my other point about Mars. 10 years ago, I would have been the first person on that ship. Today, you couldn't pay me enough to go to Mars. There's nothing there. You think after 8 months in a spaceship, you figure we're landing on Mars, we're going to open the door, and we're going to come out and take off our helmet. No, you're dead then.
Not that particular planet. I mean, it could very well be that it did have life, in the distant past, and something happened to eradicate
maybe
that.
a billion years ago.
And to find the evidence of that would be groundbreaking for sure. I like the idea of it, but I don't like the idea of it being an escape plan so that we stop trying to save this environment.
Oh, yeah, well, Elon Musk talks about wanting to have a two-planet or a multi-planet society in case something happens here. Well, you know what? I'm thinking about it, and how long would it take to create a fully self-sustaining Martian colony that didn't require any more assistance from Earth? What do you do when you're on Mars and you ran out of toothbrush or deodorant, or you got toenail fungus and you ran out of Carousel? So, I mean, what are you going to do? Where are you going to find zinc on Mars to make zippers?
And we have a long way to go. I don't know what that timeline looks like. However, I do think there's tremendous value in us learning how to take those first steps. You build a dinghy and sail out into the bay before you cross an ocean to discover a new continent.
Sure.
So I think that going to the moon, of course, discovering more resources and things. We're finding ice, and now I think we're gonna find a lot more than we were taught on other celestial bodies. And as our ability to transport ourselves greater distances, greater speeds, this may not be the only interesting solar system. All these things are fascinating, sort of mental exercises, working towards a long-term goal of inhabiting and exploring other planets like Star Trek. We're not there yet. However, I still think that the mind that becomes fascinated with big leaps like this solves real-world problems too. That mindset of sort of exploring science. How do we build a biodome? Well, create a balanced ecosystem. Well, we have one right here. Let's study this one. Let's study what creates oxygen on our biodome that happens to be pretty big, but it's the same thing. So I don't think it's useless at all.
Well, I'm not saying it's useless. I'm just saying that, Mars has no magnetic field, so it's plummeted by cosmic radiation. Its atmosphere is 1% of Earth, so meteors don't burn up and they come through intact. It's like it can be 140 degrees below zero. Now in summer at the equator, it can actually get up to about 70. But we're talking a window that's this wide, and the rest of the time. And the one thing about, you saw The Martian?
Of course.
Okay. One thing
Many
about
times.
it's a great movie. But one thing about I think was a little bit far-fetched, Remember the storm that blew them away?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With only 1% of the atmosphere that Earth has, the fiercest winds on Mars would be breezes because there's no mass.
Low density.
1% atmosphere. It's just like when I went up in that mid. We had to be traveling at Mach 2.3 to be at 85,000 feet because the air is so thin. You have to be physically moving through huge massive space to keep the engines lit. If you took a cubic foot of air at sea level, there's X number of oxygen molecules. If you take that same cubic foot at 85,000 feet, there's like 100 times less air molecules. Yeah. So that you can't fly slow at that altitude.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating. Well, so I mean, where's it all going? I guess that's the real question. All this stuff, where's it going?
I've put all my focus. I've put all my focus into writing.
There it is.
Book.
Yep. Oh, I've got one.
Yep. Right. Yep.
No, where did I put it? Oh, I put it in my bedroom. I was going to pull it. I was going to pull it out for you, and I put it up in my bedroom where it belongs, where I'm actually reading. It's a phenomenal book, and people will be very, very glad when they buy it because you've done a great job. Along with you've written a few books lately.
Well, I wrote this is my first book, and it's the first book published. But I've written. Let's see. I've written 2 new books.
There you go.
Mighty Max and Daniel. Whoop, can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
Mighty Max and Daniel, about a man and his dog, and they share each other's lucid dreams, and they go on adventures. And through Max constantly challenging Daniel's thinking, Daniel turns into this incredible person where he wasn't before. And then at the end, Maxwell dies. And when remember the movie Oh God with George Burns?
Oh, sure. That's a good one. Yeah.
So right after Maxwell dies, he's watching that movie. And at the end, when George Burns walks away, he just disappears. That's what happened with Maxwell. And Daniel says, "Oh my God, Maxwell wasn't just a dog; he was God. He stepped off the throne long enough to inhabit a 10.2-pound rescue dog in order to put me on the right path to life." Maybe that's how it really works. Who knows? I mean, look. If there is a God, and if he is omniscient and all-powerful, who's to say he can't pop into a dog? He popped into Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
So he can pop into a dog if he wants to. Is it like people used to tell me, well, Jesus would never smoke a cigar. I go, why not? They're good. And he's not going to live long enough to get cancer anyway.
Oh, my God. Here goes the lightning bolt. Well, it's very, 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 very amusing.
My other book is, can you see the one that says Farewell Dad? Farewell Father?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I wrote that about my father, who was, without a doubt, the nicest and kindest man I ever knew. I mean, he had lots of flaws, but when it came to a good heart and a kind spirit, no one would beat my dad. Yep. So, anyway, but I've got 8 other books in the works.
You're managing to be an unbelievably productive author. I mean, prolific beyond belief, and you're doing it your way. You've proven and come up with ideas that can make this actually a very realistic possibility. You know, the way that you planned on launching it with that. I remember you had the world's largest carbon fiber crossbow to break the inertia and get it moving. The sexiest chain of words of all time. World's largest carbon fiber crossbow. I'm like,
do you know how much that bow cost?
No, I don't.
Like 15 to 20,000. Because carbon fiber is not cheap.
No, it's
and
not.
epoxy resin isn't cheap. But that was kind of cool. But I never got to use it because I wanted to launch base jumpers with it.
Yes.
Because if you put it on a cliff, on the top of a mountain or cliff, normally someone would jump like this with my catapult. Instead of doing this, it would do like this to
Yeah.
give you enough distance out that
Yeah.
even if you want to shoot open, if you were aimed, you'd have plenty of time to turn.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea, and it still is the low-hanging fruit, right? It's physically possible as long as the acceleration isn't gonna, cause any problems with
Well,
blindness and
it
heart
would be
stopping.
it would be rather high G's, probably 6 or 7, but only for half a second.
Yeah.
So it would
Yeah.
be tolerable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Miles was launched off of it was like a bed on bungees where they launched him straight up and he was able to get a canopy open, a base canopy. So that's entirely possible. Yeah, there's many ways to go. And I think when I think of your mindset, it's very similar to mine. I hope that people are willing to surrender to these crazy dreams, these crazy, like, I wonder if you could land a wingsuit on a moving train, if you put a big bounce house on the top, if you could match rates. I wonder what if that space of wonder, where the imagination blossoms, that's a beautiful place. And you have lived in that space on and off. I get it. We all fall off of it from time to time. You've lived in that space for most of your life.
Well, I lived in it from 96 to 2005. Then it came to an end, and then I was just kind of working on all these inventions, but not one of them ever succeeded. And I've invented over 800 things. I've built prototypes of about half of them. And I only sold 22, and 4 of them never made it to the shelves. And then, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them were done so poorly they didn't last on the shelves. I only had 3 toys that made me money, and then, of course, 1 toy that made me $9 million. So, but I'll tell you one thing, you don't dump $9 million in the lap of a bipolar person. Actually, you're asking for trouble. Because I became so manic. I went into the Mercedes dealer one day to pick up some lambskin seat covers I had ordered for my Mercedes, and there were 2 beautiful cars, an SL55 AMG, about 150 grand, and a G55 AMG. Before I left that dealership, I had written them a check for $249,000 and took those home. So now I have my original Mercedes, these 2 Mercedes, a BMW M5 and a BMW M Roadster, and a GMC Sierra pickup. And you know what? I turned around and sold these things almost as fast as I bought them, taking, $100,000 loss. But that's me. Another time, I woke up on a Saturday morning and said, I'm going to clean the house today. And then, boom, mania hit. By the time my feet hit the floor, I had a whole new mission. I got dressed, grabbed my little travel bag, headed to the airport, flew to New York. When I got to New York, I flew to London. And from London, I just kept buying tickets east until I got home. So it took 14 countries, 62 hours, and $32,000.
Wow.
So, but that's mania for you. I mean, it just comes on. In fact, I don't have the picture here, and that's probably best. But I have a picture showing what mania feels like to me, and it's someone right behind me holding a gun up to my head. And if I don't go where he directs me, I will die. If I turn left, I die. If I turn right, I die. Now, obviously, that's not real, but when you're bipolar, you believe it's real. Not that there's a guy with a gun, but mania is going to get you anyway. So, yeah, the mania associated with bipolar is just unforgivable.
I wonder if you had, connected with Ringo Starr in Fiji, and he said, we were learning about meditation, and you, at that point, that early on, in 77 or whatever this was, you learned to meditate and control it and see options and have each thought be an option and not a certain conclusion that you must. I wonder how much even more productive right? I know you don't always think of yourself as productive. You were, deal with it. You're a freaking amazing human being. But what else could you have done if you had that sort of grounding practice? I wonder.
Well, there's two ways to think of it. I often think, man, I wish I'd never been born bipolar. But then I look back and think, how many of the things that I've done have been because of being bipolar? I
True.
wouldn't have accomplished those things. But then I stop and think, but you know what? Most of those things I accomplished, I shouldn't have. I mean, you know, when I started my submarine, I had a gut feeling inside that this was never going to become a business. We're never going to put them into production. We're never going to put them in resorts. I knew that ahead, but the mania kept me from seeing it. So I just labored away on this thing until it was finished.
Right.
And you know, oh yeah, there was another guest on the island who I loved. Remember Gomer Pyle?
Of course.
Okay. Jim Neighbors came to the island. And did you know about his singing voice?
Beautiful singing voice.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And I got to hear him sing a cappella, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, anyway, just to hear them singing that was cool.
Wow.
And then another time, I needed a break from Turtle Island, so I said, let's go to Thailand. So I was in Thailand. This was like either January or February of '87. And so I was in Phuket, and I was in a restaurant that was like frequented by Americans. And I looked up, and someone walked in the door that I recognized. No one else did because his star hadn't risen yet. But it was Robin Williams, and he was there to film Good Morning Vietnam. So when he came in the restaurant, he had only been in Mork and Mindy. That had been off the air for 5 years. He had been in The World According to Garp and Moscow on the Hudson.
Yeah.
But he was almost no longer known.
Yeah.
And that's why I was the only one to recognize. So I called him over to the table, and we sat down, and we had a beer, and we started chatting a little bit. And he actually, I was kind of bantering with him with the same kind of humor back. And he even told me that I had a comic mind. And
you do?
Then his people came, and he had to leave. And we only had about 20 minutes. But I'm convinced if we had an hour to sit there and talk, that we would come away friends.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely true. Yep. I had that realization the day I met you in Zephyr Hills, Florida. Do you remember this? It was 20 years ago or something. Was it 24 years ago? And you had these really cool, like VR, the early VR type glasses where you could watch videos on your glasses.
Video glasses.
Amazing. And all these things. And you got into jumping, you got your license. I built your parachute. I remember a Lotus 170, I believe it was.
Yeah. And I had a triathlon 190.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, get this. I only made 73 jumps in my life, okay? I used to have 3 complete rigs. I had that Quasar 2 from Strong Enterprises. That's where your parachute went. And then I had another Javelin with another triathlon. And then I had the one that I jumped most, which was a Javelin with a triathlon 190.
Yeah. Well, you came prepared, like Michael Schumacher, the race car driver. He bought all of his rigs up from student status all the way to a 120. He had them all set and ready to go before his first jump.
Wow.
Because he knew where he was going, and he had all these rigs. Unlimited resources leads to unlimited creativity, and that's not always a bad thing. It can be, but I think you've shown what's possible if somebody decides, right? You might call it manic phases. I get that. But your ability to allow yourself to stay focused and on task, be diligent, and have follow through is commendable. You did so much.
Well, I used to work on 5, 6, 7 inventions at a time. I used to just be doing so many things, and I had such a multitasking mind. In fact, I've always considered my mind to be like half of a grapefruit. And each segment is an isolated thought or idea. And so instead of having them always here jamming up my mind, I can go to the grapefruit and find that what I'm looking for, and then download it, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
so my podcast
Yes.
is gonna
Let's talk
be-
about this. What's
it's
it called?
The Flaming Brain, because, like I said, my whole
Yeah.
life, that's how it's felt. There is my can you see?
I do.
There,
Yeah, you can see it just fine. I know. I can totally resonate. I live there half the time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Monday, my goal, if I can keep up to it, is 3 episodes a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday is Bipolar Mental Health Monday, where I'm going to take people down the road. It's going to take probably 8 months to run through, because it's taken me 67 years to get to this point of being bipolar. I can't expect to spend an hour or 2 hours or whatever to give people the real story. I want to walk them through what my life has been like from a child up to here, and all these troubles and problems I faced. Wednesday is Inventor's Workshop, and I'm going to be all about inventions from my experience and my knowledge. And same thing, I'm going to walk people through. You've got,
I like. Oh, this is.
You've got this, okay? And then you got this.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm going to walk people through all these things.
I love it.
Patent or not patents. Because you know that only 3% of all issued patents ever make money.
Yeah.
And 80% of patent infringement suits lose, and the average cost is $250,000. So the thing, and like I said, my Disney toy wasn't even patented.
I love it. What you're doing is great. There's so many inventors out there, young and old, that haven't realized their dreams. They haven't followed through, and it'll be wonderful for people to be able to connect with your mind and your wisdom that you've gained through doing it the right way and a whole bunch of wrong ways.
Well, there's a saying that says, you never learn from success. You only learn from failure. And that's so true. Because when you succeed, there's no lesson to learn. But when you fail, there are huge lessons to learn.
Yeah.
But
you just got to keep your chin up.
Yeah.
You
Well,
gotta profit.
one of the sayings I've always loved, and it used to be far more apropos, says, success is going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm.
There it is.
And then
Keeping
George
that vision
Patton, George Patton said, success is how high you bounce once you've hit bottom.
Nice.
So I have a book called The Most Brilliant Thoughts of All Times in 2 Lines or Less. And
I
it's
have
my
that.
book of wisdom. Because
I have that too.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites is by William Penn, who said, take care, therefore, where there is more sail than ballast. And that has been so true in my life.
Yep.
I've headed out on the ocean way too many times with a massive sail and no ballast.
No ballast at all.
First brush of wind, and I'm over.
Right. And this is why, for me, what's kept me sane is meditating, and all the versions of meditating, like hiking in the forest in silence. To me, that's meditating. That's the heavy keel for me that keeps me from capsizing as often.
Well, my favorite form of meditation is fentanyl meditation. The only problem is you usually don't come out of it.
Yeah, I ask Michael Jackson, right? Yeah, so I do believe that that there's a way to keep the creative mind moving forward without it capsizing itself, without overspeeding your prop, so to speak, and create things that properly evolve and help the world. Help the world get to become a better, happier place that's more efficient, more sustainable. It's all the creative mind that's going to solve these things. And it is not an easy place to go. It is, emotionally challenging, and it's not often supported by the people around us. But you, Brian, have done that, and you've set an example in ways to do it, in ways that okay, maybe not exactly like that.
And then my favorite, my jet-powered bicycle.
Oh, there you go.
I put a 55-pound thrust jet engine on my bicycle, and I got up to 58 miles an hour at the airport. Then I put 2 of those engines on a go-kart, and I got it up to like 80. And then I put one on my paraglider harness.
There
The
you
only
go.
problem is that we eat up all the fuel in 5 minutes.
And
I would think the noise would also be an issue. Those
Oh,
are
you
pretty,
wear earplugs, of course.
they're very, very loud. Yeah.
Those
Amazing.
things are, yeah.
so cool. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for all that you've done. I'm thrilled that we had a chance to do this, and I would love to have you on the show again, because I know this conversation, we've been having it for 24 years. We're not done.
No. And when I have my podcast going, I'm going to want to have you on too.
I look forward to that. I look forward to that.
I'm so excited because, honestly, following suit with what Robin Williams told me, my podcast is going to just be, informative, serious, fun, entertaining, educational, and you know what? Funny as hell.
Yes,
I've seen some of the snips, and definitely the comedic value is going to be awesome.
Well, you saw that one clip. I was talking about a pepper spray device that I invented. And I thought I had already fired it twice. And so I was looking at it, like this, and then poof, it fires right in my face.
I thought that was a gag. When you sent me that video, I was sure it was just a gag. And
No.
in fact, you pepper sprayed yourself and laid yourself out for 3 hours.
Fortunately, it didn't hit me here. It hit me about here. But I'll tell you what, just the stuff coming off of it as it went by, because it had gone like this far, was enough to put me down. And then it hit my hair, and then immediately was dripping down on my forehead.
Oh my. Oh, well, now you know not to do that. See, now you're a more qualified pepper spray user.
Well, it's like, I'm glad it happened because I'm fine now. But I got
Now you know.
money from.
Yes, it is a true non-lethal weapon. Just very, very painful. Wow. Crazy. Well, I look forward to seeing the podcast. I look forward to participating in any way that you're interested. And I want to thank you so much for spending time with me and telling a part of your massive story. And I look forward to more.
My YouTube channel, Rocketguy06. I got 50 videos there.
Yes.
You can see just pretty much everything that Brian and I have just talked about. So
Rocketguy06. Thank you so much. I really value your insights and your story.
Well, I
Absolutely
really love you, Brian.
wonderful. I love you too, man. My brother from another mother.